Hey everybody, welcome back to College Funding Hero. In this video, we're going to explore a question that I get pretty frequently, especially when families have a very generous grandparent. So grandparents often want to dote upon their children and grandchildren later in life. They want to see that money have an impact as they pass around the wealth from generation to generation. And when grandparents want to see an impact, one of the first things they think about funding is education. And a lot of times when you're trying to fund college education, what you end up doing is putting that money into a 529. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at whether a 529 that's owned by the grandparents is the best decision for your family. So we're going to look at that in this video today. But if you find this video valuable, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We provide a lot of valuable information around college funding and making sure you're not paying that sticker price for college. So again, subscribe and like this if you find value in here. But let's dive in. So first off, why do grandparents want to fund a 529 for their grandchild's education? One of the simplest reasons is for the tax benefits. So a 529, if you put money into it, in a lot of states, that actual contribution gets a tax deduction. And so therefore the grandparents can get a tax deduction in the year they're putting that money into a 529. That's the benefit for the grandparents. There's also a lot of benefits for the student as well, as because it's tax deferred growth as long as that 529 is used for college expenses. So what that means is once the grandparent puts money in, that money never has to pay taxes again as long as it's used for education. So things like tuition, room and board, books, can even be used for like a laptop if that laptop's used for school. So tax incentives are a big reason that grandparents want to use a 529. Another reason grandparents want to contribute to a 529 is to limit their estate tax. So if a grandparent is to pass away, unfortunately, well, their estate could be subject to taxes by passing from one generation to the next. A way to get around that is to pass along your estate during life. So the IRS allows you to gift up to $15,000 per year per individual without any taxation. So what a grandparent could do is take $15,000 per year, move that into a grandchild's 529. That's a gift from a tax perspective, and there's no taxes from that generation shift. So that's another reason grandparents want to use 529 is to be able to pass along their wealth tax-free. And another benefit from the estate tax perspective for the grandparents is they can actually donate up to 5 years of gifts all at once. So 529 allows you to do that because they want to fund education to take away from the student debt crisis that's going on right now. So that means a grandparent can actually donate $15,000 times 5. And what's even better is if both grandparents donate, so that $15,000 is per grandparent. So if both grandparents donate from one side, then that equals 15 times 2 per year, so $30,000 per year, or $150,000 lump sum as a one-time 5-year gift. So that's how powerful it can be for grandparents shifting their wealth to their grandkids and also helping fund that college education. Now, to understand why you may or may not want the assets in the grandparent's name, you have to understand a little bit about how financial aid is calculated, because that's going to be the biggest reason that you wouldn't want assets in the grandparent's name. And that's because if you're trying to go to a certain college and you need the financial aid, well, that 529 in your grandparent's name could affect your chances of getting good financial aid or better financial aid than you may otherwise. If your grandparents' assets that are in the 529 are good enough to cover college, this may be a non-issue for you, but if it's not, this can be very important to you. So to understand how the aid is calculated, we have to look at what's called the EFC, or Effective Family Contribution Calculation. How that EFC works is basically you fill out the FAFSA form, that free application for federal student aid, and within there you declare what the student's assets are, the student's income, the parent's income, and the parent's assets. And what happens then is you compare that so that gives you your effective family contributions. That's basically saying, here of our assets and income, here's how much we can pay for college. And so from that, each of those different pieces are factored at a different multiple. So for example, student's income. Every dollar of student income, they're assuming that 50% of that dollar is going to fund college education. For students' assets, it's 20%. So if a student has $1 in their name, 20 cents of that dollar is expected to go to pay for college. Parents' assets are about 5.64, and parents' income ranges depending on the income. But you can kind of see how that's factored in to calculate that effective family contribution number. So then how that EFC number is used is you have your sticker price of college, that cost to attend. And then what they do is say your cost of attending is $50,000 and your effective family contribution is $20,000. Well, now there's a $30,000 difference between the two, and that's your need. So that need is what you can get financial aid on. Now let's take a look at how that effective family contribution number can be affected by having a 529 in a grandparent's name. So if you noticed when I was going through that EFC calculation, there was nothing about grandparents' assets mentioned because those aren't on the FAFSA form. So grandparents' assets aren't mentioned and aren't calculated. So that's why 529 in the grandparent's name will kind of be left off the radar to begin with. That being said, where the impact comes in is when the student actually draws out of that 529 to pay for college. Every dollar that is taken out of that 529 to pay for the student's education is looked at as income for that student. And if you recall from me going through that calculations, income in the student's name is the highest multiple. So that's factored in at 50%. So every dollar transferred to 529 lowers that chance of getting financial aid by 50%. So you can see how that can really impact your chances of getting aid. And since you're doing that FAFSA form each year, if you make a mistake and pay too much with a 529 in year one, well, you could blow your chances of getting aid in the future. So this could be a huge problem if you do need financial aid. So that's something that you're going to need to look at with your family to make sure if you're keeping that 529 in the grandparent's name, then you don't need the financial aid. Now, there are a few strategies that you can use if you do need that financial aid and your 529 is in the grandparent's name. One of the first things you can do is to switch the owner of the 529. So most states allow you to change the owner of the 529 to say the parents instead. That being said, if you change the ownership of that 529, depending on the state, grandparents may lose their tax benefits that they had gained from using that 529. So before you change the owners, make sure you look into the tax implications in the state that you're using a 529 currently, just so that way you're well aware of whether the grandparents are going to get impacted or not. You don't want to make that decision blind. Another tactic that you could use is to start distributing that money from that 529 after the sophomore year of college. So from the FAFSA form, how it works is it looks at your prior tax form. So by post sophomore year, you should be set from the income tax forms of what's going to be looked at for college. So therefore, you can safely take money out of that 529 without ruining your chances of getting financial aid. Another strategy is similar to just changing the ownership, but it's actually rolling over that money into a parent-owned 529. So that depending on the state, this could be a way to both keep the grandparents' tax benefits, but also to get it into a parent-owned 529. So most states allow you to do a rollover once a year into another 529. So you can safely roll from a grandparent's 529 to a parent's 529 without any issues, but just double check on your state's specific taxation in terms of doing that rollover, but that could be a way to get it into a parent-owned 529 without the grandparents losing their tax benefits. One final way to get it out of a 529 or a grandparent 529 without having too much impact on financial aid is to basically take out student loans and things like that in the student's name as opposed to actually paying it off directly with the 529, but then post-college, pay off those student loans with the 529 assets. This way is not necessarily ideal just because if you take money out of 529 that doesn't go directly to fund education expenses, which student loans don't count as that, unfortunately, then you can be subject to both taxation and a 10% penalty. But that being said, desperate times can call for desperate measures, and that is one way to get the money out of a 529 without drastically impacting your need for financial aid. So I hope you found this valuable, and I hope this gave you some insights into what you should do for your own family situation. But if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. We'd love to answer any questions you have around 529s or grandparent-owned 529s, anything like that. Please send in the comments, and we'll make sure we get you an answer. But thanks again, and if you did find this information valuable, make sure you like this channel and subscribe so you can get more great insights on how to fund college effectively. Thanks.